Hello, hello, hello. Sorry, I was a few minutes late. I had showered earlier and I was just getting my hair done for tonight's, well, I wasn't getting it done for tonight's stream, but oh, yay! The Amazing Lolly finally released his Punisher video. All right. Save to watch later. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Okie dokie. Let's see. Sitting at my phone so I can see the chat. Yeah, today, this weekend was just pretty much just wrapping up Christmas stuff and also some personal stuff. Not getting into it because who the hell wants to hear me bitch about my normal life? All right, give me 2 seconds. There we are. All right. Let me know at any point if there is a glitch in what's going on. I am setting up the chat right now. All right, so I have just received the packing stuff for the comic books for Next Evolution #1. I have yet to receive the physical proofs. The digital proofs looked fine, but I still want to see the physical proofs to make sure that it looks good in physical print. You never know. Sometimes it looks fine in digital, and then you get it in print, and it's just a hot mess. So I'm gonna get that situated soon enough. Fire! Anyway. But that is not what we're going to be going on with tonight. What? Holiday baking. Never mind. Alright. There we are, Indie Comics slideshow. Unfortunately, one of the campaigns that's going to be listed on here did not make their goal, which is very sad. Very sad, very sad. But yes, I am going to be getting the physical copies for Next Evolution soon. Here. Where are you? My boyfriend was here a little bit ago, and we were just watching old Betty Boop and Popeye cartoons. It is really whack what they got away with back then. But, it's fun at the same time. Though I made the mistake of leaving him in charge with selecting the videos while I was taking a shower. So I have no idea what my YouTube algorithm is going to look like. Alright. So, Christmas Carol. We are still on the second ghost, and we are still at the nephew's party. It's just after we got to talking about how ridiculous it is that Scrooge found it offensive that the nephew came in and said Merry Christmas. So we are just getting done with that. Gotta take another drink of some snake oil. What the heck? My neighbor must have been really angry at her pantry. Alright, anyway. Still on the second of the 3. After tea, they had some music, for they were a musical family, and knew that they were about when they sung a glee or catch. And I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like a good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead or get red in the face over it. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played among other tunes a simple light air, a mere nothing. You can learn to whistle it in 2 minutes, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past. When this strain of music sounded, all the things that the ghost had shown him came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that if he could have listened to it often, years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the assistant spade that buried Jacob Marley. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. Stop. Oh, hey. Yeah, good evening to you too, Storytime with Friends. Hi. Thank you for coming by. Alright, where were we? My opinion is that it was a done thing between him and Scrooge's nephew, and that the Ghost of Christmas Present knew it. The way he went after that plump sister in the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature. That's one way of putting it. Knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping up against the piano, smothering himself among the curtains. Wherever she went, there went he. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anybody else. If you had fallen up against him, as some of them did, and soon there, he would have made a feign of endeavoring to seize you, which would have been an affront to your understanding, and would instantly have sidled off the direction of the plump sister. I love that's her main characteristic, the fact that she's plump. Okay. Every man has his type. We're not going to judge that. Every man has his type. She often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not. But when at last he caught her, when in spite of her sulking rustlings and her rapid flutterings past him, he got her into a corner whence there was no escape, then he conducted what was most execrable. I need to work on my pronunciations. For his pretending not to know her, his pretending that it was necessary to touch her headdress and further assure himself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger and a certain chain about her neck, was vile, monstrous. No doubt she told him her opinion of it. When another blind man being in office, they were so very confidential together behind the curtains. Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind man's bluff party, but was made comfortable with a large chair and a footstool in a snug corner where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her. But she joined the forfeits and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise, at the game of how, when, and where, she was very great, and to the secret joy of Scrooge's nephew, beat her sisters hollow, though they were shopgirls too, as Topper could have told you. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting in the interest he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears. He sometimes came out with his guess quite loud, and very often guessed right, too, for the sharpest needle, best Whitechapel, warranted not to cut in the eye, was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and took upon him with such favor that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guests departed. But this the spirit said could not be done. "Here is a new game," said Scrooge. "1 half-hour, spirit, only one." It's like it's interesting how the spirits are teasing the true Scrooge out of Scrooge. Like, they know the goodwill is there, but they're just teasing the goodwill out of him. It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answered to their questions yes or no, as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning to which he exposed elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talking sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and wasn't made a show of, and wasn't led by anybody, and didn't live in a menagerie, and was never killed in a market, and was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a pig, or a cat, or a bear. At every fresh question that was put to him, the nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last, the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, "I have found it! I know what it is, Fred! I know what it is!" "What is it?" cried Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge!" Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, though some objected that the reply to "Is it a bear?" ought to have been "Yes." Inasmuch as an answer in the negative was sufficient to have diverted their thoughts from Mr. Scrooge, supposing that they had ever had any tendency that way. "He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure," said Fred, "and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge!" "Well, Uncle Scrooge!" they cried. "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is," said Scrooge's nephew. "He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge!" Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he could have pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them for an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last word spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful on foreign lands, and they were close at home by struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hopes. By poverty, it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain men in his little brief authority had not made fast the door, and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing, and taught Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night, but Scrooge had his doubts of this, because the Christmas holiday appeared to be condensed into the space of time they had passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it, until they left a children's Twelfth Night party, when, looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, he noticed that its hair was gray. "Are spirits' lives so short?" asked Scrooge. "My life upon this globe is very brief," replied the ghost. "It ends tonight." "Tonight!" cried Scrooge. "Tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near." The chimes were ringing the 3/4 past 11 at the moment. Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, said Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit's robes. But I see something strange and not belonging to yourself, prodding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw? It might be a claw, or the flesh there is upon it, was the spirit's sorrowful reply. Look here. From the foldings of its robe it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garments. Oh man, look here. Look, down here, exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and girl, yellow, wearing, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too, in their humility, where graceful youth should have filled their features out, and touched them with its freshest tint. A stale and shriveled hand, like that of age, had pinched and twisted them, and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat, the throne devils lurk, and glared out menacingly. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humility in any grade, though all the mysteries of wonderful creation has monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge started back, appalled. Having them shown to him in this way, he tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked themselves. Rather that the parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge could say no more. They are man's, said the spirit, looking down upon them, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree. But most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it, cried the spirit, stretching out its hands towards the city. Slander those who tell it ye. Admit it for your facetious purposes, and make it worse, and bide the end. Have they no refuge? No resource? Cried Scrooge. Are there no prisons? Said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. Are there no workhouses? The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the predictions of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Alright, having a little drink, set for the end of the chapter. Again, I find Scrooge is such a complex character when you really think about it. Because, yeah, he's a curmudgeon, he's a miser, but also there is still good in him. Like, the joyful party man is still in there. The person who wants to be good is still in there. It's just he's walled himself away from the world. And that's something that Dickens is trying to get across, where he did that to himself, and because of that he is blind to the world around him. And though he was a genius in business, he is ignorant in his surroundings. Dang it. There goes my bookmark. Get back here. I had it. And here it is. You are going under the incense holder. You're going to stay there. Alright. Stave 4. The Last of the Spirits. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. "I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come?" said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. "You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us," Scrooge perused. "Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. The spirit's like, yeah, I know what I look like, but come on, buddy. We gotta get this over with. I hate it when a drop escapes your lips a little bit. Right. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusty shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand and one great heap of black. "Ghost of the future!" he exclaimed. "I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. "Lead on," said Scrooge. "Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about him and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, on 'change, amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups, and looked at their watches and trifled through with their great gold seals, and so forth, as Scrooge has seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said the great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it, either way. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked a third. taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. "I thought he'd never die." "God knows," said the first, with a yawn. "What has he done with his money?" asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the edge of his nose. Is that a fancy way of saying booger? Alright, whatever. That shook like the gills of a turkey cock. "I haven't heard," said the man with the large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker, "for upon my life I don't know anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer?" "I don't mind going, if a lunch is provided," observed the gentleman with an excrescence on his nose. "But I must be fed, if I make one." Another laughed. "Well, I am the most disinterested among you after all," said the first speaker, "for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go, if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye." Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men, and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided into the street. Its finger pointed to the two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here. He knew these men also, perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy, and of great importance. He made a point always of standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is. Strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" returned the other. "Well," said the first, "Old Scratch has got his own at last, hey?" "So I'm told," returned the second. "Cold, is it? Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?" "No, no. Something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, their parting. Well, shit, that sounds like normal stockbroker talk. Which I guess is slightly disturbing that things haven't changed. Especially when talking about a friend's death. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to this conversation, apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was the past, and this ghost province was the future. Nor could he think of any one immediately connected to him to whom he could apply them. But nothing doubted that whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. I mean, technically, yes. He looked about in that very place of his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought and hoped he saw his newborn resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied, from the turn of the hand, and its situation in reference to himself, that the unseeing eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder, and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, and the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshotted, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offences of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter racked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling shop below a penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offals were bought. Upon the floor within, there were piles of heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, edges, files, scales, weighs, and refuse iron of all kinds. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupt fat, and spicules of bone. All right. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in, by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frosy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters hung upon a line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. I'm developing Cottonmouth way too early. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them, and they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. "Let the charwoman alone to be the first," cried she who entered first. "Let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance, if you hadn't all three met here without meaning it." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlor. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. Aye, how it shrieks! There ain't much a rusty bit of metal in the place as its own hinges, I believe, and I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. Ha ha! We're all suitable to our calling, and we're well matched. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor." The parlor was the space behind the screen of rags. The old man racked the fire together with an old stair rod, and having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was the night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat in the flaunted manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking with a bold defiance at the other two. "What odds, then? What odds, Miss Dilber?" said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "That's true indeed," said the laundress. "No man more so. Why then, don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose. No, indeed, says Miss Dilber and the man together. We should hope not. Very well, then, cried the woman. That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss for a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose? No, indeed, said Miss Dilber, laughing. If you wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, perused the woman. Why hasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, and instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself. This was the line from that article I was reading from. Yeah, wasn't he natural? Which I couldn't for the life of me recognize when that happened, but now that I'm seeing it in context, it kind of blows apart the meaning of what he was trying to say. I think I can get this book done tonight. Then I'll message whoever has the rights of Conan. It's the truest words that ever was spoke, said Miss Dilber. It's a judgment on him. I wish it was a little heavier judgment, replied the woman. And it should have been, you may depend upon it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid of them to see it. We knew pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breach first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of not so great value were all. They were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up into a total when he found that there was nothing more to come. That's your account, said Joe, and I wouldn't give another sixpence. If I was to be boiled for not doing so, who's next? Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself, said old Joe. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown. And now undo my bundle, Joe, said the first woman. Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. What do you call this? Said Joe. Bed curtains? Aye, returned the woman, laughing and leaning towards her crossed arms. Bed curtains! You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all, with him lying there, said Joe. Yes, I do, replied the woman. Why not? You were born to make your fortune, said Joe, and you'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can get anything in it by reaching it out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe, returned the woman coldly. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now. His blankets? asked Joe. Whose else do you think? Replied the woman. He's likely to take cold without him, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things as he did. Aye, you may look through that skirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting of it? Asked Joe. Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it, and I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. As he sat, groped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp, he viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. Ha ha! Laughed the same woman when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead. Ha ha! Spirit, said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around it to be in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know of what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced toward the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it. He felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set upon thy altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast at thy command. For this is thy dominion, but the loved, revered, and honoured head, thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purposes, or make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous and true, the heart brave, warm and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, shadow, strike! And see his good deeds springing from the wound to sow the world with life immortal. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed. He thought of the man. He thought if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard-dealing, griping cares? They have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house with not a man, a woman, or a child to say he was kind to me in this or that, and for the memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge could not dare to think. "Oh, Spirit," he said, "this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go." Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. "I understand you," Scrooge returned. "I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power." Again it seemed to look upon him. "If there is any person in this town who feels emotions caused by this man's death," said Scrooge, quite agonized, "show that person to me, Spirit. I beseech you." The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room of daylight, where a mother and her children were. Alright. We are reaching towards the end. Fire. Doo-ba-doo. Part of the reason I enjoy incense is if I can light stuff on fire without any consequence. Yay! She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried but in vain to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight in which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until after a long silence, he appeared embarrassed to answer. "Is it good," she said, "or bad?" to help him. "Bad," he answered. "We are quite ruined?" "No, there is hope yet, Caroline." "If he relents," she said, amazed. "There is nothing in past hope, if such a miracle has happened." "He is past relenting," said her husband. "He is dead." She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so, with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness for the next moment, and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart. What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and that I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor of his successor. We shall sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline. Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces, hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was a happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure. Let me see some tenderness connected with death, said Scrooge. Or that dark chamber, spirit, which we left just now, will be forever present to me. The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet. As they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where Scrooge heard those words, he had not dreamed of them. The boy must have read them out, and as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. But why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. The color hurts my eyes, she said. The color? Ah, poor Tiny Tim! They're better now again, said Cratchit's wife. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time. Past it, rather, Peter answered, shutting up his book. But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these few last evenings, Mother. Oh. Sorry, I just received a group text from the family. Apparently tonight is cookie night for my sister and her children, and my little nephew made a cookie of a squid. They were very quiet again. At last she said, in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, I have known him walk with Tim upon the shoulder. Very fast indeed. So have I, cried Peter. Often. And so have I, exclaimed another. So all. But he was very light to carry, she resumed, intent upon her work. And his father loved him so that it was no trouble. And there's your father at the door. She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob, in his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it most. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid, each child a little cheek, against his face, as if they said, Don't mind it, father, don't be grieved. Bob was very cheerful with them, and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table, and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be so done long before Sunday, he said. Sunday? You went today then, Robert? Said his wife. Yes, my dear, returned Bob. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child, cried Bob. My little child. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what happened, and went down again quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still, Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked just a little down, you know, said Bob, inquired what had happened to distress him. On which, said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you've ever heard, I told him, I am heartily sorry for you, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know. Knew what, my dear? Why, that you were a good wife, replied Bob. Everybody knows that, said Peter. Well, very observant, my boy, cried Bob. I hope so. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card, that where I live, pray come to me. No, it wasn't, cried Bob. For the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind way, and this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. I'm sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You would be sure of it, my dear, returned Bob. If you saw and spoke to him, I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter and a better situation. Only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried one of the girls, Peter will be keeping company with someone, and setting up for himself. Get along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob. One of these days, though there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whenever we part from one another, I'm sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? For this first pardoning that there was among us? Never, father, they all said. And I know, said Bob. I know, my dears. And when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. No, never, father, they all cried. I am very happy, said little Bob. I am very happy. Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, and the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God. Hey, that's heavy. Spectre, said Scrooge. Something informed me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me what man that was whom we saw lying dead. The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before, though at a different time. He thought, indeed, there seemed no order in these later visions, save that they were in the future, and to the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, said Scrooge, through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The execrable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. He paused and looked round before entering. A churchyard. Here, then, the wretched man whose game he had now to learn lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repellent appetite, a worthy place. Scrooge stood among the graves and pointed down to one, the spirit, my goodness, stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw new meaning in its solemn shape. "Before I draw near to that stone to which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only?" Still the spirit pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if persevered in, they must lead," said Scrooge. "But if the course be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me." The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Am I the man who lays upon the bed?" he cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. "No, spirit! Oh, no, no!" The finger still was there. "Spirit!" he cried, tight clutching at his robes. "Hear me! I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for these intercourse. Why show me this, if I am past all hope?" For the first time the hand appeared to shake. "Good spirit," he perused, down upon the ground he fell before it. "Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life." The kind hand trembled. "I will honor Christmas in my heart, and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." In his agony, he caught the spectre's hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty, and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hand in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yeah, I suppose that's one way to spook the life out of greedy people, to get them to enjoy Christmas. Got one stave left. Whoop, whoop. Probably won't last for the next hour, but oh well. I wanted to start at least a little early to make sure I got this taken care of. I'm going to take a slight break. Probably should read something that has more of modern lingo, because I do appreciate older books. It's just reading them out loud, I sound like an idiot. It's not that I don't know the words, it's just pronouncing them is a whole other matter. Yeah. I can't wait for Crom to come out. Can't wait for a lot of these. Well, Heroic Tales has already come out, and that was a good comic. I need to hurry up and write a review for Heroic Tales #1, because it's a classic superhero story, but it's also subversive in that the main hero marries and has a fucking family and acts like the patriarch. So, which it's weird to say that is subversive, because a lot of like superheroes, it's like, yeah, they might get married, or yeah, they might have a kid, but later down the line, or it's like, nah, we need more drama, so they'll like break up the marriage, kill the kid, or have the kid like hate his parents or whatnot. It's quite disheartening. And for those asking, yes, that's why older readers are not hippy-happy with Peter and Mary Jane being broken up with and Mary Jane being with another dude. They're not hippy-happy with the fact that Peter Parker isn't having the happy ending. Because guess what? People like to see their heroes have a happy life, even if there is drama and danger. Alright. Break's over. Time for the last stave. The end of it. Yes! And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own. To make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this.
I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face went wet with tears. "They are not torn down," cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. "They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will." His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties of their parties to every kind of extravagance. "I don't know what to do," cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect laocoon of himself with his stockings. What the hell is a laocoon? Anyway, "I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello here. Whoop, hello." He had burst into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. Sorry. "There's the saucepan that the gruel was in," cried Scrooge, starting off again and going round the fireplace. "There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Ha ha!" Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. "I don't know what day of the month it is," said Scrooge. "I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. I don't mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello there!" Mood. He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out their lustiest bells he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell. Bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist. Clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, cold. Piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight. Heavenly sky. Sweet, fresh air. Merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. "What's today?" cried Scrooge, calling downwards to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. "Eh?" cried the boy, with all his might of wonder. "What's today, my fine fellow?" said Scrooge. "Today?" replied the boy. "Why, it's Christmas Day!" "It's Christmas Day!" Scrooge said to himself. "I haven't missed it! The spirits have done it all in one night! They can do anything they like. Of course they can! Of course they can! Hello, my fine fellow!" "Hello!" returned the boy. Like, the kid's not the least bit weirded out by all of this. "Do you know the Poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?" Scrooge inquired. "I should hope I did," replied the lad. "An intelligent boy," said Scrooge. "A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prized turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prized turkey, the big one." "What, the one as big as me?" returned the boy. "What a delightful boy," said Scrooge. "It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck." "It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "Is it?" said Scrooge. "Good. Buy it." "Walker!" exclaimed the boy. No, said Scrooge. "I am in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell them to bring it here. I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off with a shot. He must have had a steady hand at the trigger who could have got the shot off half so fast. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit, Richard," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. "You shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob Cratchit will be." The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "I scarcely ever shall look at it before, with an honest expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello, Hoop, how are you? Merry Christmas." It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He could have snapped them short off in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge. "You must have a cab." "All right, Scrooge, calm down." The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle for which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not as easy a task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention. Attention, even when you don't dance while you are at it. But he had cut the end of his nose off. If he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put the piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, and he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him. Scrooge regarded every one of them with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 of 4 good-humoured fellows said, "Good morning, sir, a Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley, I believe." It sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met, but he knew what path lay straightened before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge. "That is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will have the goodness," where Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath was gone. "My dear Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me the favour?" "My dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I don't know what to say to such "Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will," cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank ye," said Scrooge. "Thank ye." "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." I only got 6 more pages, so I'm going to take another beer break. Beer break! Oh. Headphone popped out. Doopity doop boop. Boop. He went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up into the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. "Nice girl, very." "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank ye." "Thank ye." "He knows me," said Scrooge, with a hand already on the dining room lock. "I'll go in there, my dear." He turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in a great array, for these young housekeepers were always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred!" said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started! Scrooge had forgotten, for the moment, about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Let him in. It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece took just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful anonymity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat at his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank. One of my coworkers, very, very nice guy, does his job well, but he has a known habit of coming in 15 minutes late. It's a wondrous occasion when he comes in on time, but sometimes it's like a little bit past start time, and the manager's like, where is he? Why isn't he here yet? And I'm like, just give it a few minutes. He's 15 minutes late. We all know it. Just give him a few minutes. He will be here. And yeah, he will usually show up 15 minutes late. It's his thing. He's a very nice guy, but that's kind of just his thing. Doopity 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 doop. His hat was off before he opened the door. His comforter, too. He was on a stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge, in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I'm very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I am behind my time." "You are?" repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please." "It's Swansea here, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." "No. I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I'm not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And theremost," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig into the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, "and therefore I'm about to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea to knock Scrooge down. "Whack him with a stick! Hurry!" I forgot that part. Alright. Our neck with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court to help with a straight waistcoat. "A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge, with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back. "A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary, and endeavour to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this afternoon over a Christmas bowl of Smoking Bishop, Bob." Apparently, Smoking Bishop is a cocktail that you can make. "Make up the fire and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more, and to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as good the old city knew, for any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and a little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, He thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins and have them made to less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with the spirits, but lived up to the total abstinence principle, the TPA. Ever afterwards, it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. Alrighty. I forgot how short that last chapter was. But I get the feeling that Dickens was known for being long-winded in his speech, and I get the feeling that even though he did truly want to write this story, a little part of him was like, and then he changed his ways, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end. Like, I don't know. Maybe he's one of those authors where sometimes them things are a bit too schmaltzy for him. But I hope I'm not going to get hoed by YouTube if I'm showing you guys this. There is this movie. What is it called? Yes, Christmas Carol. There's this one movie that was made a few years ago. The Man Who Invented Christmas, yes. Because Christmas apparently was just not too terribly celebrated, or at least it wasn't celebrated to the same extent as it is now, and Charles Dickens straight up changed that, so... No, we are not going to watch the full movie. Okay, trailer. Alright, the official trailer.
Hello.
Alright, so... Drama. I'm going to give proper credit so I don't get hoed! The Man Who Invented Christmas. I do not own this property. Please do not come after me. Ooh, we can watch Miss Mojo react to it.
Hello, I'm Christopher Plummer, and I'm so excited to be sharing this new trailer for my upcoming movie, The Man.
God bless us, everyone.
Oh, it's just cinnamon roll.
Humbug.
So he's had a couple of flops? Well, who hasn't?
You have a new book in mind?
Oh, of course he does.
I ran out of ideas.
Are we in trouble?
No, of course not. I have told you not to disturb me when I am working.
The spirits pour into the night.
Look here, Mr. Dickens. Pickpockets, streetwalkers, humbug. Those people don't belong in books.
Charles!
It's about a miser, and on Christmas Eve, he meets some kind of supernatural guides.
Does it have a title?
Humbug, A Miser's Lament. Christmas ghost story, Christmas song. Christmas ballad, something like that. The name right, and the character will appear.
Titles are the worst with me. I have the hardest time with titles. I don't know what it is, but this is like so relatable. I want to watch this movie so bad because I just feel like
every single frame is gonna be like mood, 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 mood.
Scratch, Scrounger. Come on, Scrooge.
Shut the window. You think I'm made of money?
Mr. Scrooge. How delightful to meet you, sir.
Sorry, I can't say the same.
You and I are going to do wonderful things together.
How do you think a world come alive? I could almost see and hear them people.
Even if you'd already written it, we couldn't possibly get it printed and distributed in only 6 weeks.
If I can't finish it,
Not with that attitude.
The characters won't do what I want. I'm the author here.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Jolly ghost. What's that mean?
In the season of hope, we will shut out nothing, and everyone will be welcome.
I have to get to the printers by 9 o'clock.
But you still don't have an ending.
Merry, Merry Christmas to one and all. That's enough. Back to work.
God bless us, everyone.
Yeah, like a Christmas apparently was like it was like yeah, it was an important holiday, but it wasn't the extravagant spectacular that we know it to be today. But let's peruse on down here to Miss Mojo. Gotta finish off this can first and light another incense. I got an orange creamsicle beer, and no, it sounds gross to some. It sounded gross to me too. But you know what? Sometimes a good tart sour is just what the doctor ordered. But anyways, boop. Come on.
The Wooble sent me some crochet kits to try out, and I've never
I don't care
used
about the
it
Wooble!
before, so I'm really excited to see how it goes. So it looks like the kit comes with all of the yarn that you need for the project, and I
Yeah,
ended up with some
crap.
leftover
That's
yarn,
right.
which was really
This
nice.
channel, I
And
have to...
then I found this
Alright, we'll
little
hear about the Wooble! Give the Wooble his audience!
crochet hook and the stuffing. And in this envelope, it has a card, and on the back of that card is a
I am
QR
not
code for
sponsored, I am
instructions.
just...
And
This
it
is
also
what
came
it
with some
is.
black yarn and
Fine.
an
Let the
embroidery
Wooble
rag
speak.
and a darning needle. So this kit really comes with everything that you need for the project. So once I scanned the QR code, this is what I found, which is super cool that it has instructions for
I mean,
a
that is a
lefty
cute
and
little-
a righty. And
that
then
is a
the
cute little
I was
thing.
most blown away by that they do is they start the
It's just some
message
shit
for
with
you.
knitting.
If you know, in amigurumi crochet, you pretty much always need
Okay,
to start with
can I
magic glue.
skip this,
And I get
or-
lots of
yeah,
questions on how to do
fuck.
this, so I know it's really tough
Yeah.
for a lot of crocheters, especially if you're new. So the fact that
Fine!
makes it super easy.
Let the Wooble have his
on
time.
how to do it in their instructions. So if you're already an experienced crocheter, they have the pattern just to download and then you can follow that. But if this is your first time crocheting, they have video tutorials for every single step and it looked like it was really easy to follow.
Nice
I would
orange
have loved to
tag.
have this as a beginner. Something else that's really cool that I saw on their TikTok is that they made this yarn. It's called Easy Peasy Yarn, and it is perfect for beginner crocheters because it doesn't split apart and fray like most other yarns, and also it's really easy to see the stitches and where to insert your hook, which I feel like is the biggest problem that beginning crocheters experience. Overall, I genuinely do love this product and I really recommend it to all those beginner crocheters out there, and even to more experienced crocheters. It was really fun for me to make. I'm very proud of him and I'm really excited to make more.
No, we do not want to hear more about the Wooble.
It's all about humbugs, ghosts, and the Christmas spirit. Welcome to Ms. Mojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 best adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe for more great content. For this list, we're looking at the best TV and movies based on the famous 1843 novel by Charles Dickens. The overall quality of the adaptation will be given priority. and not whether it sticks close to the source material.
Mr. Scrooge.
Because let's be real, It's a Christmas Carol. We all know the story by now, so it can be forgiven if they decide to go in a slightly different direction, so long as they get the main point of the story right. So, it's Christmas, we forgive.
How delightful to meet you, sir.
Sorry, I can't say the same.
Number 10, A Christmas Carol. In this early 21st century adaptation, Robert Zemeckis combined his fascination with 3D
the same guy who did the
motion
Polar
capture
Express.
with a classic Christmas story. Starring Jim Carrey in multiple roles as Ebenezer Scrooge and the Three Ghosts, 2009's A Christmas Carol sticks pretty close to the novel, and even keeps the original dialogue, while greatly upping the visual splendor and humor. This eccentric Christmas adventure received mixed reviews upon release,
Because
as
it's
not
creepy
everyone
as
reacted
fuck to
fondly
look at.
the animation style. Yet the narrative still maintains much of the original story's heart, depth, and Christmas magic.
And Scrooge was better than his word. He did all that he said he would, and more.
Yeah,
Number 9,
that is some creepy ass animation. As much as I appreciate the effort, that is some creepy animation.
Who's A
I am
Christmas
not a
Carol.
Doctor Who fan.
With time and space at his fingertips, it was more a matter of when rather than if the Doctor got around to adapting Dickens' classic.
Is there such person as Father Christmas?
Oh, yeah. Me and Father Christmas, Frank Sinatra's Hunting Lodge, 1952.
This quirky and creative holiday special happened during Matt Smith's tenure as the title character, with BBC casting Michael Gambon in the role of Scrooge, although the character's name is changed to Kazran Sardik.
Merry Christmas, Mr. Sardik.
I despise Christmas.
Shouldn't. Very you.
An emotional roller coaster, the episode sees the Doctor filling in for the Three Ghosts, as he tries to mend Sardik's broken heart to save a ship from a storm. Oh, did we forget to mention that Scrooge can control the weather in this adaptation? Number 8, Mickey's Christmas Carol. Disney and Dickens seem like a match.
Don't homie Disney!
Create this enjoyable Christmas short. Marking Mickey's first cinema appearance in over 3 decades, this colorful adaptation plays it surprisingly straight, with only minor diversions from the source material. With our main mouse as the underused Bob Cratchit, Scrooge...
Something I find very odd is when they make the mention of, oh, they're playing it straight. Oh, they're playing it straight. It's like, why wouldn't you? Look, I'm fine with, like, certain diversions and adaptations, but it's like, if you diverge too much from the story, you kind of break it a little bit. But A Christmas Carol is a very simple story to understand. That's probably the big reason why it's the most popular out of Charles Dickens' works, is because it's such a simple, easy story to understand. And if you divert from it too much, you kind of miss the point of the story. So I'm very confused what the whole, oh, they played it straight. It's like, why wouldn't you play it straight? Okay.
Scrooge McDuck is of course Ebenezer Scrooge, a role he was created to play. With fan
Literally,
favorites
he was literally made for that.
Pete also making appearances.
Why, yours, Ebenezer. The richest man in the cemetery.
Nominated for an Academy Award, this magical short offers fun for the whole family.
Disney, do not hold me.
Number 7, Blackadder's Christmas Carol.
Humbug, Mr. Bullock. Oh, thank you very much.
Leave it to Rowan Atkinson, Richard Curtis, and Ben Elton to deliver a fantastic parody of Dickens' story. Blackadder is the proprietor of a Victorian mustache shop and the nicest man in England. Despite being rather successful, this anti-Scrooge is always broke due to donating most of his earnings to charities.
It'd be a lot more if you didn't give away so much money to the poor.
Well, yes, but in the feeling good ledger of life, we are rich indeed.
Yeah, I just wish we weren't doing so well in the bit short of prezzies and feeling a gullible prat ledger.
The ghost actually visits Blackadder to congratulate him on being an upstanding human being, before setting out on a journey through time to visit his evil ancestors.
I suppose that means that everything of Lord Melchit's becomes yours.
I suppose it does. Merry Christmas, Mom.
Featuring that biting sarcastic wit that the series is known for, This twisted Christmas Carol is hilarious for all the right or wrong reasons.
But what about my tiny Tom?
If I was you, I'd scoop him out and use him as a houseboat. Good day.
Number 6, Scrooge. The only one to feature a trip through hell, this award-winning adaptation turned Dickens' story into a musical.
I like life. Life likes me. Life and I fairly fully agree.
Despite the occasional moment of madness, Scrooge sticks pretty close to the source material, with Albert Finney hamming it up as the pivotal character.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I shall remember this moment until my dying day.
While those who love a good song and dance might appreciate the multiple unique musical numbers, its impressive costumes, sets, and cast create an experience worth watching for everyone. Depending on whom you ask, the infamous hell scene is one of the best or worst Christmas sequences of all time.
I kind of want to see
Number
it.
5, A Christmas Carol.
Oh, this is the one I remember as a child. This is the one that was played when I was learning about the story in freshman in high school.
This adaptation is mostly remembered for George C. Scott's memorable depiction of Ebenezer Scrooge.
As
Backed by an
it should.
impressive cast, which includes Frank Finley as Marley's ghost, this version is rather slow-paced compared to some of the others.
I mean, have you read the book? I have. For the last 3 weeks.
Scott brings a manic quality to his performance, however, as this Scrooge doesn't settle on merely ignoring the holiday season. Due to how mean-spirited he initially is, Ebenezer's spiritual journey ends up being all that more rewarding.
Again, have you read the book? He literally said if these people are bitching about how hard life is, they should just hurry up and die. Scrooge was like the epitome of being mean-spirited at the beginning of the novel. That's kind of the point. So it's like, oh, he was so mean-spirited, and it's like, yes, he's Scrooge.
Filled with religious imagery, Scott's portrayal earned him a nomination for a Primetime Emmy.
Buy some more coal before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Number 4, A Christmas Carol.
You'll soon see how real you are.
I made this visit for your welfare, Ebenezer Scrooge.
We're really reaching back with this one. Arguably one of the most influential film versions, Edwin Elmarin's take might lack for memorable ghosts, but makes up for it with a solid supporting cast. While the whole point of Scrooge is to show how a lifetime of disappointment and loneliness turned him into a villain, few performances have demonstrated the broken man within as endearingly as this early adaptation.
We spirits have no fear.
Okay, this shit is why I thought the Ghost of Christmas Past was a female for the longest time. Because it's kind of a crapshoot with the Ghost of Christmas Past. Either the Ghost of Christmas Past is like an old man or like a weird spirit thing, or it's a chick, a pretty chick in a pretty dress. And I am going to lay the fault on Dickens here, because like, how the hell were you gonna take that biblically accurate description and how the hell that ghost was supposed to look like and adapt it to film? I've said it before, I think he was trying to go for, you're looking at the ghost like you would look through like a crystal or something, but it's like, how the hell do you translate that to film or play or anything else? Like, can't you just make something, a dude in a tunic, like it was originally described at before we got to the whole, like, oh, you blink and suddenly has like 6 arms and and it's like, wasn't that hard to just stick to a dude in a tunic that looked like he was a light? Like, would it kill you to just stick to that?
Shifting focus towards the side characters and their relationships with Scrooge, this adaptation might not hold too many surprises,
that's the point.
But its status as a classic is well deserved.
God bless us, everyone.
I think they colorized this version.
Number 3, Scrooged. Bill Murray is Scrooge. Do we really need to say anything more?
Bah humbug.
Frank Ross is a network executive who cares only about the ratings and is struggling to put on a live adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
All right, that worked, see?
Little booty here for you.
After being visited by the ghost of Christmas past, Murray is sent on a trip through Dickens' famous story, with each new ghost just upping the insanity.
Hello, Frank. I'm the ghost of Christmas present.
The best part is that Frank's crazy story is juxtaposed with the rehearsal of the stage show, which is about as traditional as they come. Number 2, The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Don't hold me, Disney!
Most childhoods, this classic was a landmark release, as it showed the Muppets still had a future following the unfortunate deaths of Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. Despite being very much made for kids, the movie has Michael Caine playing it straight as Ebenezer Scrooge, which helps ground the more over-the-top portrayals of the popular puppets.
How would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly
unemployed?
The first film to turn this classic into a musical, The Muppet Christmas Carol is probably the most fondly remembered, as songs like Marley and Marley and One More Sleep Till Christmas are ingrained in our collective consciousness.
Do not strike me!
Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions.
keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine?
How much may we put you down for, Mr. Scrooge? Nothing.
Dino, you were the ghost? Well, what happened to Philo?
The bedrock bug.
Number 1, A Christmas Carol, also known as Scrooge. It's the defining version
Oh
of the
yeah,
Christmas classic.
this is the version I know, and I believe it's free on YouTube.
We have seen some truly villainous depictions of Scrooge, but Dickens' original was more indifferent than sinister, something captured brilliantly by Alistair Sim's nuanced performance.
I mean, you can argue that he wasn't an active villain, but indifferent? No, Scrooge was not indifferent. He was very much a, you will earn your dang keep, and if you don't, die. Like, that was Scrooge at the beginning. You can argue that he wasn't, like, actively killing people, so therefore he's technically not a villain, but there's something very villainous when someone comes up to you and say, hey, a lot of people are struggling right now, do you want to help out? And your answer is, why don't you just die already? Like, there's something evil in that. I am sorry.
An argument could be made that the movie improves on the original novel by expanding on Scrooge's childhood and relationship with his parents.
She died.
Didn't all the versions have this scene?
Your father never forgave you, as if you were to blame.
The almost unsettling depiction of loneliness makes the eventual redemption sequence an absolute joy to behold, as Sim abandons subtlety and wholeheartedly embraces the Christmas spirit.
From now on, I want to try
That's
to help
all of the versions, but okay.
if you'll let me.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out these other great clips from Ms.
Some very, interesting commentary. Alright. So, let's look at what is free on YouTube. Alright, A Christmas Carol. So, if you are in the mood to watch A Christmas Carol, alright, so it looks like... Yeah, it looks like the 51 version is up here. Don't know if this one you have to pay, the George C. Scott version, but yeah, there are a plenty. Of course, the Sir Patrick is not. Oh hey, overly sarcastic. I used to very much enjoy overly sarcastic, but the video that got me to stop subscribing to them was the video where I was talking about, I believe it was like the native tribes within Russia who had their own lore, like outside of like the White Russians. And Red went on a tirade about how sad it was that their stories weren't preserved. And this one dude, he tried so hard to preserve these stories. And this was like a 10-minute long video, and 5 of those minutes were her just bitching about how these stories weren't preserved. And my only thoughts were, okay, sweetie, if you want to do a video about these stories, fine. Honestly, a lot of people would appreciate if you did like a big 30-minute video where you went through multiple of these stories. So fine, do that. But when you promise one story and you make a 10-minute video and then you just spend half of it bitching about how people don't care, it's like, there is a certain very annoying hypocrisy about that. Anyways. But yeah, there's multiple versions of A Christmas Carol here for you to watch. Here. And oh yes! Yeah, the Twilight Zone did a Christmas Carol-esque. Well, it was Christmas Carol-esque, I should say, because it was basically a drunk bum of a Santa Claus becoming Santa and learning to find joy in Christmas. Let me come back up here. Do we have to pay for this one? No, we do not! Awesome! I know what me and my boyfriend are watching later this week. Alright. Well, I hope you enjoyed this stream where we read some of the Christmas Carol and just delved a little bit into some of the media stuff. But I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas if this is the last you'll hear from me, and I'll